Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where top leaders in science, tech, pharma, finance, and innovation open up and get real. You are in the right place. You're about to hear personal stories from key moments of their career arcs and how they've struggled and succeeded when it comes to moving audiences from the red light of risk to the green light of go. We've got an exceptional invite-only lineup of leaders who've been in the room and at the table when stakes were high, decisions were hard, and their stories had to land. From the virtual room to the boardroom, they share what worked, what didn't, and how they paved a path to green lights by communicating authentically through strategic stories. I want to thank you for joining me today. Let's jump in. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of Red Light, Green Light. I am your host, Cindy Skalicki, and every week we bring to you a leader in science, technology, and innovation who's ready to share some of their storylines from decades in the industry. And today I'm really excited to have to bring to you Kelvyn Cullimore. Kelvyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cindy. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. There's such a wealth of things I want to talk about, so I'm going to dive us right in. Everybody, Kelvyn is currently the executive director at Utah, an innovation lab he will tell us a little bit more about. But he also brings such an interesting storyline prior to that with a company, Dinatronics, is that correct? Did I say
Dinatronics?
Dinatronics, sorry.
Yep. That's right. There's a lot of them out there.
There are nowadays. I'm sure back then it was the only one, right? No,
Right.
No, but that is a great storyline that I would love for you to share a little bit more about. And as I was thinking about the episode today and what you specifically bring, Kelvyn, we talk a lot with founders about the double sell, right? You have to sell the problem, you have to sell yourself as the lead jockey that can bring it to market. And you're kind of like a double tell, where you've got this great experience of bringing a med device to market and then working in the physical therapy space as well. And then, really taking that company through all the rankings that most founders dream of. And now you're giving back by being in a seat where you can help the founders who are going through the same things you did a few decades ago, right?
So. Yeah. Hopefully my experience is still relevant.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's one of the things I've experienced working with so many who are really seasoned at innovation. There's such wisdom, and you help people skip the potholes. So take us back in time, if you wouldn't mind, just for those listening who haven't met you before. Tell us a little bit about your early career storyline.
Sure. Well, my father and I were fortunate enough to start a company, and we acquired Dinatronics from another entity. Okay. We had no experience in the life sciences or medical devices. We just thought it sounded cool. So we thought we'll get into this, and ran into this agency called the FDA that regulates this space, and we had no idea about those regulations. We learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And so FDA shut us down. So we had to go public to raise money to do clinical trials.
Okay.
We were fortunate enough to do that, even though the product ultimately was not approved. It opened the door to a space that was ripe for innovation. And we were successful in bringing innovative products, electrotherapy, ultrasound, other kinds of products to the market, and became a fairly significant provider of equipment to the market. If you ever go to a physical therapist's office, chances are pretty good you'll see a product with a Dinatronics label on it somewhere in that office.
That's awesome. And I suspect it was during a time when that was a real need in the market, right? I mean, what decades were those?
Yeah, that was in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. So it was, and I had the privilege of running the company for about the last 25 years. Okay. And it was, my dad had other ideas he wanted to pursue. So that was a real learning experience running a public company and
Yeah.
developing new products and working with FDA. During that time, I had the privilege of sitting on the board of the Medical Device Manufacturers Association in Washington, D.C., and doing advocacy for the industry as a whole.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay,
so
great.
that was a great
Yeah.
experience.
That is interesting. And we sometimes help leaders who are doing that very work, taking the advocacy route, going to Capitol Hill and sharing
Hmm.
their expertise around whatever the space is that they're in. Well, actually, let's stay there for a second, Kelvin, because, a lot of leaders we help are, in the corporate realm. We do kind of two areas, innovation labs and corporate leadership teams. It's hard to get out of lab and into lead when you're running a company. You were the CEO, and I'm sure you kind of like bumping into the FDA, you kind of bumped into how to be a CEO leader. So tell us about some of those. Can you think back to a couple of, lessons learned either the hard way or maybe that someone guided you into, during those years of growing the company itself and running a team?
Yeah, I mean, it's any CEO will tell you that a lot of it is learning by doing.
Sure.
And so you try and apply principles to your leadership,
Hmm.
but every circumstance is different and it can require a different set of principles that you approach it with. So
Sure.
from my experience, you learn that you have to be persistent and you have to have the end goal in mind.
Hmm.
Because if you just mindlessly pursue a path without knowing exactly where you're trying to get,
Right.
you don't ever get there. And
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
obvious, any leader understands that.
Mhm.
But in medical devices in particular,
Right.
you can get off track worrying about reimbursement, worrying about
Sure.
FDA, worrying about your product uh, capabilities,
Yep.
and there are so many factors that go into it that you have to learn to factor all of that in to a plan to get your product to market.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can't be really a slow decision maker at
No,
that seat at all, and in fact, it reminds me my first role out of college was at a global ad agency, and my boss, I remember one thing she said was, hire people, bring people into your circle who you feel are smarter than you are, and you will be in good company to grow and be pushed. Would you agree with that statement or a
I
flavor
think
of
we
it?
all, yeah, I think every CEO would pay lip service to that.
Yeah,
Challenge is then will you listen to those
right.
people and
Mhm.
will you actually, I think one of the challenges a lot of leaders have is there's a certain amount of insecurity, a little bit of an imposter syndrome where you're
Yeah.
wondering, and so you feel like you have to assert yourself to be that leader,
Yeah.
where in reality, the security comes from knowing you are the leader. You need to take all this into account and really build
Mhm.
your team and move forward
Mhm.
and know that it isn't all about you. I mean,
Right.
yes, you've got to make the decisions, you've got to give the direction, but boy, you've got to have the team who will be pulling together with you
Yeah.
because nobody does it alone.
Exactly. It's not a sport for individuals, it's a team sport without question, and knowing, who's in the room and how you can get the right expertise to make that decision is key. Do you have anyone who you would point to or tip your hat to that really helped you in those times that you would kind of lean on, early on or even later, a mentor or someone you just held in high regard for how they led?
Yeah. I mean, my father was I mean, most people, it's a challenge to work with family.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one
I
of my
was,
questions.
I was fortunate to be one who had a father who was not only exemplary, but basically trusted me and allowed me to make mistakes without being critical
Mm.
and helped me learn by doing under his tutelage. I
Mhm.
remember before we took on Dinatronics, we had another company we were running well simultaneously with that. And
Wow.
the company ran into problems and the bank called our line of credit and
Okay.
said, "You're done."
Wow.
And my dad, I walked out, I said, "Oh my gosh, I guess we're going to file bankruptcy." I just thought the world was
Yeah.
coming to an end. He just looked at me and says, "No, give it a few weeks. We'll figure it out." He did. We got it
Wow.
done and turned it around. The bank gave us a bigger loan. And so
Amazing. Wow.
I learned a great lesson from him on, boy, you got to be persistent
Mm,
and keep working towards the solution and
yeah.
not let barriers like that get in your way,
Wow.
even if the
That
bank
is
says you're done.
Yeah, exactly. And like even if you are in the end, you have to try and see where you can land
Mm,
by, kind of pushing up against that and say like, are you sure about that?
right.
Does it have to be this way? A lot of times when we're in stressful situations, we think in binary terms, like we have a yes or a no, a this or a that. And it takes that other person to go, wait, there's another option. Let's take a
Hmm.
look at that. So
Yeah,
was your
that's very
dad
true.
was your dad in finance or tech, or what was his like?
He was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
He loved starting
Yeah.
companies, and once we got him going, he kind of lost interest. So
Okay.
I like being an entrepreneur as well, but I really like the challenge of building the company.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's turn our conversation toward that and what you're doing now at Bio Utah because, well, first let's just educate us a little bit. When did Bio Utah start and what is its main purpose in your region?
Yeah, Bio Utah is a traditional 501c6 trade association
Okay.
that works with companies of all sizes. We do a
Okay.
lot with early stage companies and
Okay.
helping them get off the ground. We help with capital formation. We do everything we can to connect them to resources. We work closely with our universities in the state who produce a lot of IP that become
Mm-hmm.
companies,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. But we do a lot of advocacy as well.
Okay.
So my background in doing advocacy on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. was beneficial. And while I was CEO, I didn't have enough to do, so I became the first mayor of a city, a
Oh,
suburb of Salt Lake City called Cottonwood Heights.
of course.
Ran that for 13 years while
Oh,
I was
gee.
CEO. And so, I joke I'm the only entrepreneur in the state that started a medical device company and a city. So
Yeah,
it's
right. There you
a
go.
different kind of an entrepreneur,
Right.
and
It's like, I'm going to build a city so people can use my innovation and
yeah.
then we can,
So that background gave me a lot of insight into the state government, and so
Yeah,
we do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the industry, both at the state and federal level. And my background in the life sciences and connections through FDA and things of
right.
that nature really helped to bring a knowledge base for the trade association that could benefit companies that are members of our association.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Well, I have so many questions now, but I will try to stay stay on the path. When it comes to the political rhetoric piece of things and the mayoral, running, what were some ahas from that type of communication that you learned the hard way or prepped for, to get, I mean, it's a
Well,
different style of communicating. Hmm.
yeah, I think there are several lessons learned from either being a mayor or a CEO. And as mayor, you're CEO of your city, so to
Right.
speak, and as
Hmm.
a CEO of the company.
Hmm.
And one of the things is you're the visionary. You're the one who's saying this is the
Hmm.
direction we're going. This is what we want to accomplish.
Hmm.
But you also have to learn how to really spend your political capital. Too
Okay.
many too
Yes.
many people are try and hoard their capital and
Mm,
not spend it, because when you
mm,
spend capital either in business
mhm,
or in politics,
mhm.
you put yourself at risk because
Yes.
people are always going to agree with you and it may or may not work out. But you've
Right.
got to be willing to invest that if you're going
Mhm,
to lead. The
mhm.
other thing is you've got to have a set of principles on which you're making decisions so that it's
Okay.
not
Right.
just personal preference or it's not just because the wind was blowing this way or that
Right.
way. You've
Yeah.
studied it out and you have findings that you're basing your decision on, whether it's in business or whether it's in politics. And so those principles help guide decision making and make a leader someone people can trust.
Absolutely.
A quick pause to let you know if you love audiobooks, I've got good news. My best selling book, Red Light, Green Light, is now available on Spotify and wherever you get your audiobooks. Now, back to the show.
And I'm imagining in my mind, a lot of times we see pillars that a brand or a town or city is built upon, where you have those brand pillars, the mission, vision, and values. And, you know, years ago, I used to run sessions for helping businesses create those. And even founders and early stage companies, your messaging that you're going to put outbound and inbound eventually as you grow a team, it is strengthened significantly when you have already identified what are the pillars and values and the vision for the organization so that you can center all of those messages around there. And you don't, your messaging isn't just, wherever the wind will take it, because that's confusing to people. So, okay. Now, how about the bio part of Bio Utah? Is that life sciences strictly? Where does that kind of start and end with the types of companies you support?
Any company that is researching or manufacturing medical devices, pharmaceuticals, biologics, diagnostics, life science in a broad spectrum. If it is something that is used ultimately to improve the lives of patients, then it kind of falls into our wheelhouse.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think, as you know, Kelvyn, we talk about red lights and green lights a little bit on the podcast, because the book that I wrote called Red Light, Green Light helps leaders at all levels get their stakeholder audiences from the red light of risk to the green light of go on their idea, on their proposition. And so red is risk, right? We've talked a little bit about some of the risks that are inherent in, your time as mayor or as a founder, risky decision making, or the risk of, having a market that might not be big enough. What are some red lights that you have observed now that you've watched so many founders pitch? Let's just talk about the pitch message for a minute and how leaders come to try to sell their ideas. What are some of the red lights you see, the things that don't work when it comes to pitching and talking to investors?
The biggest challenge I see, especially for early stage, is when someone is so invested in their idea that they aren't willing to listen to the feedback on whether they have a good idea or they don't have a good idea, and whether it has whether there's a market for what they are doing or there isn't. And they get so, and you see this so often, especially with inventors. Inventors come up with the idea and they're so married to it that they aren't willing to listen to the business side of things.
Right.
And the business side dictates whether you're ultimately going to be successful or not.
Right.
I gave a speech one time at a translational research convention and talked about how too many of our inventors feel like venture capital is a dirty word, that you can't commercialize. Everything's all about research and publishing. Well, there's a place for that, but if you don't ultimately translate that into a product, you're not helping mankind.
Right. What are you doing? Right.
And so to do that, you've got to recognize where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are. And that is one of the biggest challenges, red lights I see, is inventors who do not understand their own limitations.
Right. And do you try around them for some coaching to see if they're coachable, and then, hopefully they'll kind of grow into that next level of themselves? What's your approach?
Sometimes you have to wait until they beat their head against the wall a little while before they start to say, okay, I'm not progressing. What am I doing wrong?
Crawl back.
If they're not receptive, then you're doing nothing more than flapping your gums, because they're not listening to you.
Right.
And so you really have to wait until they are in a position where they really are interested in hearing. I remember taking my company on the road and doing presentations in the dog and pony show to some investors and things. And I had a couple of them just say, no, you're way off base. And my initial reaction was to be very defensive and say, well, you just don't understand. But
they love hearing that, don't they?
They did understand. I was the one who didn't understand, and I needed to listen, and I had to learn that feedback was very valuable and not to take it personally.
Yeah. And it's like, you got to check your ego at the door, because otherwise you're being perceived as such a hard-headed person. And they don't, investors are not only investing in the idea, they're investing in the person and the team and what they are like as a decision maker and as a leader. So, you could be inventing just about anything. They'll bet on anything you create if you're a really good lead horse and you've got, great ideas. So yeah, I'm sure that's a tricky situation. It's like, okay, well, let's coach this person a little, see what they do. But if they don't move and, like that's just not going to do any of us any good to keep beating our heads against the walls for that. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, well, and I find it interesting too. Some leaders that come into the cohorts that, I enter into, the problem they're solving came out of their own experience of having the problem, right? Especially with life sciences.
Yeah.
But to your point, sometimes we're just scribbling something on the back of a napkin. It's like, oh, I've got a great idea. And it's like, well, is there a market for your great idea? And have you asked anyone if they want it? Right.
Right.
So
That's
I
right.
completely, yeah.
We have a story from our company that we used to own a donut manufacturing
You're
facility.
kidding.
No,
Oh.
we ran 1 million donuts a week, and my father was my partner at the time, and he said we need to make an orange donut. So we did this orange donut, manufactured packages, put it out on the shelf. It didn't sell at all.
Oh.
And we said, what happened? We said, well, we never asked anybody if they thought this was a good idea. We just thought ourselves it would be a good idea.
Yeah, that is a classic example.
So we just say, yeah, this was an orange donut. We're not we're not going to go there.
I've got like an image of like Cheeto fingers in my mind, which I would not want after eating a donut, right? Well, let me ask you about green lights, but I want to ask you about your moments, if you can think back, Kelvyn. When you think about your presentations you've done over the years, many, 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 of course, can you think of one that you just, absolutely nailed? I mean, you got exactly what you wanted, or you felt usually people remember a moment like this because of the way they felt in it and after it was over. And so I'm just curious if you reached a stride at some point of like figuring out how to bring an innovation to an audience in a way that was impactful.
I was very fortunate to have a partner, a vice president of sales and marketing, who understood market dynamics very well.
Okay.
My biggest job was to get out of his way.
Okay.
I was the CEO, but when it came to product development and product introduction, he ran the show.
Okay.
And I gave him total license to do that because I recognized that was a limitation I had. I was not good at I was more the orange donut kind of a guy. So I needed to have someone like him who could come in and do that. And he did it very well. So we never introduced a product that wasn't successful.
Okay.
And that was because he always based new product ideas on perceived needs in the market.
Okay.
And our dealers and people who were working in that market would confirm, yes, this works. And so they would help in the design and the outputs and things. And so a lot of it from my point of view was I reveled in our success because I was confident enough to have him handle all of that.
Right.
And he did a great job, and he loved it because he did have run the show.
Yeah. And
so
he was confident.
That was really good. On my personal side, doing the financing, I can remember several presentations I gave about our stock at a conference or something about the company. Okay. And then what I learned and where I finally became successful was when I understood my audience.
Yes.
That one size did not fit all.
Yes.
And if I knew who was in the audience, I had to have the ability to even pivot during the presentation if I perceived that the audience that was there was different than I had thought was going to be there.
Right.
And so to pivot and then to be responsive and not be so concerned about getting everything out that I had prepared, but making sure I was answering the questions that the people in the audience had.
Oh, what a perfect way to segue into audience analysis. Absolutely. Because, that's it's so key. And I feel like I get blue in the face repeating the same line to so many leaders, but it just tells me that's where the gap is, where it's like, I say this with love to people, I don't really care what you want to tell your audience. It's really about what they need to hear from you in order to be moved. And that completely flips the coin around so that we are serving our audience based on where they start, with our idea instead of all the knowledge we have and just thinking, what do I need to tell this audience? No, that's the wrong question. It's got to be, what does this audience need to hear from me so that they will move? Because that forces you to think about where they are in relationship to your idea, which is usually a lot further away than you think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, when a message fails or doesn't, you know, sing, it's because we over assumed, right? We over adjusted on some of that. So
Or you're getting too deep into weeds for the audience that
yeah,
you're addressing. That
right.
is the most common mistake I see.
Okay, love
The
that.
inventor is so excited about their
Yes,
technology and they want to tell everybody without realizing their audience has no clue what they're talking about.
right.
I mean,
Right, and they don't care. They don't
right.
wanna see under the hood. They wanna see where the car's gonna take them.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a
Right,
great
right,
analogy.
right, exactly. Well, are you hearing better and better stories and ho like, when you think about, you know, people you listen to now, and I'm just thinking about, like, pitch events you might attend or companies you're talking to in conversation, you know, I don't know, is there any theme you can point to, around how people have grown in their ability to tell stories, or is it kind of the same problem, new generation, which wouldn't surprise me either?
I actually think it's gotten better. And the
Okay.
reason I say that is because I think there are resources out there
Mm,
and people are recognizing that those who have success are following certain patterns. And
mm,
so what I am seeing that I wasn't seeing before, when I say before, remember I've been around for 30 plus years. So
right. Yep.
um, but what I am seeing is people being willing to say, teach me, help me
Yeah.
understand. How do I do this better? I really
Yeah.
want this to work, but
Mhm.
I don't feel like I know enough to make it work. And
Mhm.
that kind of leader humility
Right.
is more unique now than I think it used to be.
Mhm.
And I think that helps. I think
Yeah,
that helps.
I think that has to, and
Quick station break, listeners. If your team is ready to level up its strategic storytelling, I would love to meet you and hear your story. Shoot me a connection request at LinkedIn or via email, and we'll set up time to chat. Now, back to the show.
I mean, this might just be my perception, but I do feel like entrepreneurship in general has just skyrocketed as far as how many people are willing to try it. The online availability of anything and everyone and everything in terms of learning, access to information and people is completely different than it was, 20, 30 years ago. And you're right, there's more tools available. In fact, it reminds me of Jen Henderson is the focus of chapter one in my book, Red Light, Green Light, and she said, "Yeah, I was a Starbucks executive, Cindy. I knew how to present to people. I was good at it. I wasn't afraid of it." And because I asked her, "Why did you get help with this investor pitch stuff?" And she said, "I just knew it was different water and that I wanted to succeed. It wasn't going to be the same approach I had taken for corporate presentations, and I wanted to get good at it quickly and learn the water." And I mean, it
Smart.
really made a
That's
difference for
smart.
her.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that. Well, Kelvyn, tell us a few thoughts you might share with anyone new to the sphere of innovation and entrepreneurship. What kinds of words of wisdom or advice do you share with someone who's kind of putting their toe in the water at Bio Utah or in this endeavor in general?
Well, what I tell people is you've got to be enthusiastic
Mhm.
about your objective without getting discouraged by the path that has to be followed.
Yeah.
Because the path can be very long and it can be very trying. And
Mhm.
don't get overwhelmed by looking too far down the path. Just
Mhm.
make sure you understand the path and be
Mhm.
very focused on moving to the next step.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I mean, if someone really understood what they had to do to get a new med device or drug all the way to market,
They wouldn't do it.
they might not do it. But
Right.
but but you realize that it's the juice is worth the squeeze if you
Yeah.
really if you really focus and keep that enthusiasm and really build your network. And so that's don't do it alone. Don't, look for people who have had success, be a sponge, absorb what you
Yep.
can from those people, and then just, be aggressive but realistic.
Right. And it's a mindset game. I think that's great
Hmm.
advice, to your point about not getting discouraged and keeping the passion high. It will waver because it is such a long road. I think what I appreciate about biosciences innovation is the reality that for most founders I interact with, they've had to spend many years amassing lots of expertise. So by the time they're ready to commercialize something they've researched in the lab and studied, they're in their 50s sometimes, they're like, so they feel like they need to get in a hurry to go through the FDA hurdle and the clinical trials hurdle, which are big, long, years long things that you need to do. It can be discouraging. And so, your tip to do the one next right thing today is kind of while keeping the vision in mind. It's a good reminder because
Yeah,
without Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and to in the course of that enthusiasm, resist the urge to embellish and to
Mm,
not be totally straightforward with the people that
mm,
you're working with. I mean,
that's true.
the minute you lose credibility by over representing or over promising,
Mm,
then your
mhm.
path becomes very difficult.
Right. It's amazing how you can build credibility over time through, numerous steps forward, and one wrong move can really hurt
Yeah,
a person badly to the point of maybe not regaining that credibility to
yeah,
that level ever. And it's kind of
yeah,
scary, but we all know it's true. So,
yeah,
yeah, high integrity is critical. So,
yep.
oh, this was a great conversation, Kelvin. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of do some stepping stones through your career arc and story. Thanks for sharing with our audience all
It's
that.
been a pleasure to be a part of it.
Yeah. How can people look into Bio Utah? Where can they find more
We're
information about you?
we're on the web, bioutah.org,
Okay.
and we Utah's life science community is, if not the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing over the last
Hmm.
decade. And so we are
Awesome.
seeing a lot of growth here. Companies being established in device, pharma, diagnostics, all of it. So
Amazing.
yeah, come check us out.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have a couple events that you repeat each year so that people
Yeah,
can be aware? What are those called?
yeah, we do. We have our Utah Life Science Summit, which is kind of the state convention for life science companies in early November every year, November 11th this year.
Okay.
We have an entrepreneur and investor summit that we do for early stage companies at the end of March every year with
Awesome.
a ski day
Oh,
that
yes, that's right.
we do a ski day on the day after.
Love it.
So yeah, we try and hype that part. Gets a lot more people here.
Super. Yeah, you have a beautiful place to bring people for a
Yeah,
conference, no matter what the time of year is. So that's
yeah.
fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you, Kelvin, for coming on the show today. And we'll be back again, everybody, next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Red Light, Green Light. We'll be back with another leader with more stories that'll help you further the path on your storytelling journey. Until then, get out there, go find yourselves an audience of stakeholders and move them from the red light of risk to the green light of go. Get out there and nail it. We'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks so much. Bye bye.